The Independent Electoral Review is releasing its official interim report today with recommendations around changes needed to our electoral system. These include voter eligibility, MMP, political financing and electoral advertising, with a view to making our electoral system much more accessible for Kiwis, in particular making participation more equitable for Māori. To speak to this and more, Dr. Maria Barge, Nō Te Arawa Ngāti Awa, is Deputy Chair of the Independent Electoral Review Panel and Professor of Politics at Māori Studies at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Tēnā koe, Dr. Barge. Thank you for joining us.
Kia ora.
Now, there are a number of issues that have been recommended for change around our electoral system. What, if anything, about the report was surprising to you?
Well, we've got a huge array of recommendations, a suite, if you like, of interim recommendations. So there's probably a whole lot that people might find surprising in there. I think in terms of Māori communities, there are some things that they'll be particularly interested in. One is we're recommending the addition of a give effect to te tiriti clause, which we think will help those who are working under the Electoral Act, such as the Electoral Commission, give greater attention to that area. We're also recommending some further changes to the Māori electoral option so that Māori can change at any time. We think the changes that we've had haven't really gone far enough. So we think more needs to be done. We have some other recommendations around Māori-led community participation engagement activities that we think will support things, and quite a number of others.
Now, these recommendations are designed, obviously, to make our electoral system much more equitable for Kiwis. Why, in particular, Māori?
Well, one of the things that we've seen is that, we had some promises under te tiriti, but over the years in many areas, including in our electoral laws, we haven't seen that kind of equitable treatment. If we take, for example, the fact that the Māori electorates were pegged at 4 for about 125 years, so they couldn't increase at all. But in the general electorate seats, they were increasing as our population increased. This is one of the areas where we've seen, different treatment. So we think the Crown needs to do a little bit better in this area, and so hence this idea of it adding a give effect to te tiriti clause, we think will have a flow-on impact.
Okay, well, what should our parliament look like, and how could our system be made fairer and more representative of Māori and tikanga?
Yeah, so we've got a range of other recommendations which we think will make the whole system fairer, clearer and more accessible. Some of those around MMP, we've got a couple that go together. So lowering the threshold for parties to get into Parliament to 3.5% goes alongside another recommendation, which is abolishing the one electorate seat rule, which is where if you win an electorate seat, you can bring others in. We think those together will make some changes. We also heard a lot about political financing. So we're making some recommendations there. A lot of people were concerned about large donors potentially having undue political influence in our system, and that was impacting their trust and confidence in the system. So we've made some recommendations to make that area much more transparent and fairer.
And that kind of thing really happens most places around the world, doesn't it?
What's that?
That's the undue influence of people who are donating to various parties.
Well, I think in some areas, it's even the perception of it. If people think that there are large donors with lots of money and there's cash for access and so on, it dents their trust in the system. And what we've already seen is that when we've had inequitable treatment, there have been legacies from that impacting Māori political participation rates. And so we really want to make the system fairer and clearer so that people do feel like getting involved and can see their vote making a difference.
And what happens next then? How serious will your recommendations be taken, and who makes the decision around the process?
Well, what happens next is that we are keen to hear people's thoughts, and so we have a website, electoralreview.govt.nz. We want to hear people's thoughts, and there are a couple of areas for Māori in particular around the governance of Māori electoral data. We want to hear whether we've got it about right in terms of our recommendations. Our final report is due to the government in November, so after the election, and that'll be the end of the process for our job as the panel.
Yeah, beautiful. Love this. Dr. Maria Barge, Deputy Chair of the Independent Electoral Review Panel and Professor of Politics in Māori Studies at Te Herenga-Waka University, Victoria University of Wellington. Thank you so much for joining us today. Ngā mihi ki a koe.
Kia ora.